As Old as Time, Part 2, and her nose stuck in a book. 10 minutes later, they were in front of the cozy library fire. Lumiere had come in at the pull of a bell, and with the help of a crusty poker, lit and fanned it for them. Snacks were not allowed. That was a law older than the Beast's parents. But a kettle was wheeled in at Mrs. Potts' assistance, and, at Lumiere's, a flagon of spiced wine. Piles of giant ancient books lay around them. The Beast might not have been a fast reader, but he was certainly a strong one, carrying shifting stacks of records that spanned hundreds of pages in one trip. They were quiet for a little while, companionably flipping through their finds. Belle looked up now and then, amazed at the sight of a monster so bizarre and huge and dangerous-looking bent over a book, running a claw along a sentence as he read it, mouthing the words. She tried not to giggle at the image of him wearing a pince-nez, and the Beast really tried. He tried every possible sitting position in his chair, including almost upside down, with his legs hanging off the headrest. He took many, many breaks for tea, and then he would yawn and declare it was time for a stretch, or some exercise, or that he smelled a rat and was going to chase it down. Or his foot began to tap, and then his ears began to shake, and then he began to hum an annoying little tune, looking around the room, anywhere except at the book in front of him. "Beast?" Belle finally said with a gentle admonishment. "Sorry," he answered, chagrined. Belle had to admit, her own book was astonishingly boring. Tracts of farmable land and tithing to the church from 1623 to present, but she chose the less interesting ones on purpose. She had given the Beast oral traditions of the principality as recorded by an interested vicar. Surely there was a story or folk tale in there that would help them, and keep him interested. "Known." "Why did you never look for your mother before?" the Beast asked after less than a minute. Belle blew the annoying little strand of hair out of her face. "Didn't have a reason to. She left when I was a baby, or very young. It's always just been Papa and me, and that's just fine." But the words sounded rehearsed and tired, even to herself. The revelations of the night in the mirror put a very different spin on things, and woke up questions that she thought were long since buried and dead. Like, didn't her mother love her? Of course she did. In fact, from the visions it seemed as if Belle's was a very loving mother, if at times impatient. So why did she leave? Was life in a tiny rural village too much for a great enchantress? Was she this big, glamorous, powerful woman who had other places to be? Spells to cast? Curses to distribute? Did she long to go find adventures elsewhere, the way Belle did? The Beast was leaning forward now, like an attentive dog wide-eyed watching the thoughts she was having drip to the surface of her face, waiting for her to say something. "I think I was made to forget her," she said slowly. "Everything she touched seems utterly forgotten. I think there's magic involved, in the same way no one knows about your kingdom, or you." That was the end of the curse. She said, "If you do not learn to love another, and be loved in return, by the time the last petal of the rose falls upon you, your castle and all within will remain cursed and forgotten, forever." It was the most the Beast had spoken yet. He recited it perfectly, closing his eyes in pain at the memory. Belle felt her heart clench. True, he had thrown her father into the prison cell, but since they had sort of come to terms with their situation, he hadn't shown any signs of being the kind of monster that might cause an enchantress to curse a little boy. Can an 11-year-old even truly understand the concept of that kind of love? The silence dragged out. The Beast eventually opened his eyes and went back to looking at his book, and she too to hers. Hey, Belle, hey," he said after a moment, tapping her on the knee with one of his claws. "What?" she demanded, surprised out of her concentration. He gave her a grievous look. "I think I found something," he said piously. "Oh, I'm sorry. Please share it. That's great news." The Beast cleared his throat and held up the book, delicately indicating his place with one claw while he read. "And the long failing spring on the western side of the town at Parsons Rock was restored to its original vitality by a local woman of sorceress nature known to many. It was said she was the most powerful of all hereabouts, and thus entreated to carry out the job. Whether or not all the stories concerning her are true, everyone agreed that her magical abilities were only exceeded by her beauty, her golden hair and green eyes that caused some to call her Angel. "You see," the Beast said excitedly. "Golden hair and green eyes, it has to be her." "Fantastic," Belle said, grinning. "What else does it say about her?" The Beast's face fell, and he scanned the text. Nothing. It's mostly stories about fairies and woods people, folk doctors who could heal better than city doctors. It's all sort of mixed up. Someone was collecting interesting local legends and personages, but at least we know this was real. It happened around the time I was born. But, hang on, Belle's mind spun busy. Besides my mother, the enchantress, there were, just like fairies and stuff around here? Sure, the Beast said, shrugging. Not a lot, and I guess they were dangerous. I remember my mother and father talking about how they just wished they would go away. At first, that sounded utterly horrible and barbaric to Belle. Wishing for fairies to go away? Belle had spent most of her young life wishing to see one and reading every book about them, and she could get her hands on, and they were here all along? And yet, if they were all like my mother, powerful and ready to dispense curses at the drop of a hat, well, she could sort of see the king and queen's point. Was whatever her mother had been angry about worth what was essentially the destruction and erasure of the last magical kingdom in the world? "Maybe we don't have to find my mother," Belle said slowly. "Maybe we just need to find another powerful enchanter." The Beast shrugged. "There aren't any anymore. I remember people saying she was the last." "Of course. I should have guessed. All right, back to looking for Mama, then." "What was her name? Maybe we should find out about her in one of these books of tax records." Belle put her book down and drew her legs up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "I don't know," she admitted in a small voice. "What?" the Beast roared. But it wasn't that which made Belle shudder, it was her realization. She felt cold and strangely terrified. Maman and Papa, Maurice and... How could she not know her mother's own name? "I don't know her name. I don't know why, I just don't. I remember the whole magic thing. I would bet it has something to do with that, and forgetting." The Beast stared at her for a long time. From frozen and shocked to blurry motion, he let out a roar of rage. The books she had just been looking at were suddenly sliced into ribbons of paper and leather. She gasped and drew back her hands, but his claws had been nowhere near them. "That wasn't very helpful," Belle said as soon as she got her voice back. "Neither is looking for a woman whose name we don't know," the Beast roared. "This is useless." "Do I look happy about this?" Belle shot back. "I'm not. This is the first time I've even realized I don't know her name. How strange and horrible is that?" The Beast lowered his eyes and his ears dropped. "You're right," he mumbled. Belle shook her head and rubbed her temples. "All right. We know she used to live here and was obviously well known. We know I was born here from what I saw in the broken mirror. If we search the census books, we should be able to find some record of my birth or baptism in my father's and my mother's names." She took a deep breath. "And possibly the record of her death and its cause. I don't know what knowing that will get us, but it's something." "That makes sense," the Beast said grudgingly. "You can start with that one right there," Belle said primly, pointing at the ruined mess. "Try to figure out at least what years it was for." Meekly, the Beast obeyed. At first, it looked all the same to Belle. Rows and rows of taxpayer names, peasants who apparently didn't even merit being named at all, and an absolutely astonishing number of people named Jacques and Francois. On top of that, she realized that only very rarely were older women recorded at all. It was mostly made of male heads of household. The handwriting of the archivist was so tight and cramped and crowded that Belle often missed what a season turned, and it was from that she had to figure out when the year changed. But long before she got her own birth, about 20 years before the curse, she noticed something that had nothing to do with what they were looking for. Some of the people listed started getting an addition of funny little symbols next to their names. Curious, Belle flipped back and forth between different seasons, trying to see if it meant an increase in tax, a change of life status, or some other thing that would have been important to the castle's treasurer. Nothing. The only thing that linked them was that, generally, the people who received these symbols didn't show up anywhere later, either as a death or anything else. They were all different ages, both sexes, and all held different occupations. She couldn't see any connection between them. "Found it!" she suddenly cried, forgetting the symbols for a moment. "I found me, my birth record." The beast swooped over in his silent, unbelievingly predatory way to stand behind her on the couch and peer over her shoulder. "Belle, female, born to—" "Oh." Her face fell. "Maurice. Nothing else." The beast started to let out a roar. Without looking, Belle put her hand up over his mouth to stop him. "What is it about your mother?" he demanded around her fingers. "It's like she doesn't appear anywhere." "She erased herself, somehow, for some reason," Belle sighed. "I guess this is what happens when you have an enchantress in the family. But look, there's something. This little symbol. I've been seeing everywhere. It's in the place of where my mother's name would be, like it was supposed to be associated with her." "So?" the beast said. "So? Does it mean anything to you? Do you recognize it?" "No," he said, frowning. "It must be something important. Everyone who has one by his or her name disappears from the records eventually, see?" She flipped back and forth to show him a few examples. "Where did they all go?" "There was a plague," the beast said bleakly, "when I was a child." "No," Belle said, shaking her head, gazing back and forth between two books. The beast gave her an incredulous look. She suddenly realized how awful that "no" sounded. "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to seem so callous. I just meant that doesn't explain these people all disappearing from the town records. Look, here it is clearly. It says the person died of fever, and here, there are hundreds of entries that say that. The people with the symbol don't die of anything. They just don't appear again. Maybe they moved, like you did." "All of these people?" "I think, despite the world being made to forget about your kingdom, someone would have noticed a mass exodus around these parts. The peasants in the village where I grew up don't like anything new or strange. They would have at least complained about it." The two lapsed into the depressed silence. Belle felt like there was no solidity anywhere, that even the chair she sat on was just going to tip her over and disappear. Nothing made sense. There were no facts to hold on to, only a pile of ancient paper confetti in her lap, words and informations now rendered useless. "Elric," the beast suddenly said. Belle looked up. He was staring into the space in front of his head. "Elric, the stable master. He disappeared a few years before the curse. See, if he was one of those little marks next to him—" "What exactly do you mean disappeared? What do you remember?" Belle asked, pulling up one of the undamaged books. "He just didn't show up for work, and his family didn't know what happened to him either. My parents said it was my fault. They said I was too nice to him, and now he was leaving us and his family for a new life, the way his type always did whenever they had a little gold." "That's a terrible thing to say to a child," Belle said, aghast. "I did sneak him coins," the beast admitted, "and little treasures, just like I snuck carrots and sugar to the horses. I didn't think I was hurting anyone." This was a child. With no love in his heart? "You gave sugar to the castle horses on the sly?" she asked with a smile. "I loved them. I always loved the horses," the beast said sadly. "When this happened, I let them all go free. They were terrified of me in this form." There was a strange image. The big monster opening up a bunch of stalls to his childhood companions and pets would go away forever, now that he couldn't stand him anymore. Not a beastly thing to do at all. "Well, let's see if this Elric is in here," she said, trying to sound businesslike again. "He looks so sad." "What was his surname?" "Potts." Belle stopped blinking. "What?" she asked, unsure if she'd heard that correctly. "Potts. Elric Potts." "Like Mrs. Potts?" "Yes, that's his wife, or widow." Belle dropped the book. All of those creatures were real people? Cogsworth, Lumiere? The beast looked at her as if she was an idiot. Of course, they were all my servants. What do you think? And all of those people were turned into what they are because of your curse? Yes, the entire castle was enchanted, he said, still confused by her reaction. My mother turned an entire castle of people into furniture when she was punishing you? Well, the beast thought about it. I suppose the idea was to freeze them in time or something so they wouldn't age while the curse lasted. Maybe. Why are you so upset? Cursing a spoiled 11-year-old prince is one thing, Belle groaned. I mean, it's terrible, but what did these people do to deserve their fate? I never thought about it before, he mumbled. They were just servants. Just servants? Well, thanks to me, your just servants will remain wardrobes and candles forever. God's blood. She collapsed on the couch, pulling a pillow over her face. Tears began to roll down her nose. It's not, the beast started. You didn't, he tried again. Belle knew she was being self-indulgent. Feeling bad wouldn't help the servants. Only somehow breaking the curse would help them. She took a deep breath. Then she forced herself to sit up, crushing her hands into her eyes, making the crying stop. The Belle had his face shockingly close to hers. She noticed when she could see again. His jaw was working, still trying to find something to say. A small voice below them cleared its throat. They both looked down. Cogsworth was standing there, wringing what passed for his hands. Just thought I would ask if there's any preferences for the dinner menu tonight, he said with a meek cough. We were just about to see Mrs. Potts ourselves. We will talk to her about it, Belle said with as much dignity as she could muster. She quickly rose and walked out of the room, before looking at Cogsworth any longer caused her to break down again.